everybody, Maria Bartholdi joined by Autumn Burchett here for a Deck Tech, and you're currently 4-0 in the tournament. Congratulations, by the way. Tell us what you're playing and why.
Thank you. I'm playing Mono Blue Tempo, which is a deck I adore. The main reason it's a great deck. It's one of the best decks in Standard, and I think it's an amazing choice for that reason. But a lot of the reason I want to play it, I love Delver decks. Like, for the past 2 or 3 years in Legacy, all I've wanted to play is Delver. And suddenly we have a Tempo deck in Standard, and the last time we had that was Blue-White Delver, maybe Khan's era Jeskai Tempo. We just don't get Tempo decks in Standard. And I love that I get them.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about them. Let's take a look at some of the first cards we have listed in your deck. I happen to know what they are: Curious Obsession, Tempest Djinn, and Island. So these are kind of the hallmark reasons to play the deck. 19 islands, your mana base is great. Tempest Djinn, super powerful, and so is Curious Obsession. Talk a little bit about these cards.
So Curious Obsession and Tempest Djinn are two of probably the 4 or so best cards in the deck, the reason to play the deck. Curious Obsession lets you run away with games in a way no other card can. You can go 1-drop, Curious Obsession, hit you, draw a card, hit you, draw a card, all the while drawing into counter spells to stop your opponent developing their board or dealing with your creature, protection spells to protect your creature, Trickster just to slow them down, whilst you keep just gaining so much advantage. Tempest Djinn is the main way you actually kill people, especially in games where you don't have that source of card advantage. Really common play with the deck. You're really often looking to set up turn 4, play my Tempest Djinn, have dive down up, just so they can't deal with it. Often that even acts as a fog, because they're going to have to remove your Djinn to attack you. You dive down, now you have this massive blocker they can't attack through. And 19 islands, beautiful mana base. I mismatch mine, just spirit of the deck.
Beautiful. Curious Obsession is, obviously one of my favorite cards in Standard right now too. I played it in the SRAM deck a cycle or two ago. Did you realize how powerful this card was on the first time that you saw it?
So the first time you play against this deck, for me it was a few months ago, and your opponent goes Miscloaked Herald, and you're like, really? And then they put the Obsession on it, and you're like, well, I have this Lightning Strike, or this Doomblade effect. Try and kill your creature. They dive down it, and every single turn you're either trying to deal with it, and they have the spell to protect it, or you're casting something, but they're just drawing so many cards. It's terrifying. It's actually just a terrifying Magic card.
It's so funny, but it's so you wouldn't expect it to be terrifying just on the face of it. Well, let's move on and take a look at some more cards from the deck here. These are your creatures. We've got Merfolk Trickster, Miscloaked Herald, and Terramander, a new fellow in the deck.
Terry. Terry is great. Terry is what the deck was always missing. Because part of the problem is you don't have that much raw power in the deck. You're very tricky, you're trying to trip your opponent up. But when you get to the late game, it's very hard to actually kill your opponent if you don't have a Djinn or an Obsession. And Terry's exactly what you need.
Right.
It's your 1-drop for your Obsession early in the game. Perfect. But then you get to turn 6, you have maybe 3 instants in your yard. You have 5 islands in play, suddenly it's like you have 4 more Tempest Djinns in the super late game, which is amazing. Trickster, one of the 4 cards I nominate as best cards in the deck, reason to play it.
It does so much.
It does everything. It's a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah.
It's Flame Tongue Kavu. It destroys your opponent's Curious Obsessions. It forces them to hold up mana for your Curious Obsessions, even though it's also sometimes you don't have the 1-drop.
Yeah.
And they're well, I can afford to tap out here. They don't have a creature. You cast your Trickster, you put an Obsession on it. Suddenly it just catapults you back into the game. It does everything. It's a ridiculous Magic card. And then we got a Miscloaked Herald. You see builds differ on this a lot. It's basically how aggressive or how tempo-y do you want to be. So you look at Alexander Haynes' build, which is the really popularized build. It has 3 Heralds, 3 Charter Course. It's looking to tap out a lot more, draw a lot more cards, just deploy threats. Whereas I only have the 1, because I do value the 9th 1-drop, just as an extra Obsession target, but I'm really, with my build, much more leaning into the tempo plays, much more leaning into the I have 1 threat in play and I'm going to protect it. So it's depends what sort of approach you want to take as to how many Miscloaked Heralds you play.
All right, well, let's take a look at some ways that you're protecting your creatures. We've got 3 copies of Spell Pierce, 4 Siren Storm Tamer, and 4 copies of Dive Down. Now, I am a huge fan of Spell Pierce.
Every time your opponent casts a 5-mana Planeswalker or instant or whatever and you Spell Pierce it, it's just like, what are you doing?
You feel like Galaxy Brain. I'm a genius.
Yeah, it's incredible. You just like time walk them for 1 mana. Whilst you're getting to do all these other things, developing your game plan, and it's exactly the sort of tempo play you need to like push ahead. Storm Tamer is just another 1-drop, it's another wizard for Wizard's Retort, really important.
Really important.
And then we have Dive Down, which is the other one of like the 4 cards I think are the core of the deck. Lots of people have been trimming back on this card. I disagree with that. I think it's incredible. Just like Merfolk Trickster, it's like secretly the Swiss Army knife. Like, sure, it can protect your creature, but there are times when like they attack with their 2/1 into your 1/1, you just use it as a combat trick.
Exactly.
And that is amazing. That's exactly what you need sometimes, just these 1-mana plays that can like trade with a card and like make sure you're keeping up with them. There are even times with Terramander now, like it sounds really silly, but there are games where I've just like end of turn to Dive Down so that I can untap and have Terramander like ready to adapt. Just like being able to dump an instant in your yard, it sounds really silly, but sometimes it comes up.
And you know, if you're wondering if your mono blue opponent has it, the answer is they do. All right, let's take a look at some of your more traditional kind of permission spells here. Wizard's Retort, a single copy of Negate is interesting, and 2 Essence Capture, which you've been seeing recently more.
Yeah. So Negate is a big nod towards the fact that this deck's been getting more popular. People are playing around Spell Pierce a lot more. Maybe they're like playing cheaper instants and sorceries, stuff like that. I just wanted 1 hard counter in the main to help assist with that. Essence Capture, I like to refer to it as Searing Scatter, because it's an Essence Scatter that probably does like 3 or 4 damage to your opponent. You know, you put a counter on your evasive creature, it's going to hit them 3 or 4 times. It's complete nonsense. I would love to play more copies of this card. The problem is there are some decks where it's just blank, especially pre-board.
Sure.
But I really love having these 2 copies because the matchups where it shines, it's just like it's such a tempo boost. Like, I counter your creature and I'm going to deal 4 damage to you in the process. It's perfect.
And of course, we've got Counterspell here in the form of Wizard's Retort.
Yeah, not quite actual Counterspell. You board them out a fair amount, like trimming them, especially post-board when your opponent has more removal for your wizards. You quite often trim a couple.
Okay.
But it gives you, it's all the versatility you need in pre-board games. When you're in other pieces of interaction, you're more like powerful but specific ones might not line up. Wizard's Retort is perfect in those games.
Let's take a look now at some of your ways to draw cards and get card advantage. Chart, of course, single copy, 4 copies of Opt, and 1 Entrancing Melody. Nice.
Main deck Entrancing Melody is wonderful. I wanted to go up to 4 copies in my 75 because I think the card is really, really powerful. It's the exact card you need to swing the White Weenie matchup, which is a matchup lots of people consider bad. I think it's actually like once you have 4 melodies, it's incredibly close because the card is so powerful against them. Chart, of course, I'm only playing the 1 because I'm really embracing the tempo side of the deck more. I just don't think you can afford to sit there spending 2 mana to draw cards that often. But especially in pre-board games, it is nice to have access to a copy. Because again, you have all these conditional cards in your deck pre-board, and you're just looking to like draw towards the right ones. And then Opt is a card some people were on board with and some were off board with last set. Now everyone's on 4 because of Terramander. Like, just having, it's already a card that's in the debate for inclusion in the deck. Once you have Terramander in your deck, just like drawing it, getting that scry, digging towards your obsessions, drawing the card, and then knowing your Terramander is that much easier to adapt is huge.
Well, your build looks really sweet. Let's take a look at the entire thing and how it's shaped out for you. Overall, how well positioned do you think this deck is right now in Standard?
I think it's excellent. I think it's really good against the Soul type decks, which is huge, because that's like, I'm assuming that's going to be the most popular deck this weekend. I've not seen the stats, but being able to beat up on that deck is really powerful. It's a bit weak to Drakes, but I don't think Drakes is like that great a deck, so I'm not too scared of that. And part of the thing of this deck is, even if you have a bad matchup, your best draws are still going to run them over. The draws where you go 1-drop Obsession Dive Down, lots of people just, even your bad matchups just sometimes won't be able to interact with that.
That's a great point. So tell me, if you're aiming more towards the tempo side of things with your build, give me your case for why you should play a version of the deck like this as opposed to one like Haynes playing that's more aggressive.
So, personally, it's my playstyle. It's a big part of it for me. I love knowing that like turn 2, I'm just going to hold open mana. Not cast the Charter Course, not deploy like another 1-drop, just hold open 2 mana, make my opponent play into it, make them struggle to know what to do. I find that lots of fun. I think you gain a lot of percentage points if you're good with the deck, if you take that approach as well. And also just like 4 dive down, the fact that people have been cutting on that card, it's so powerful.
It is. I don't understand it either.
It's so obnoxious. Like, you just can't do anything against it.
I mean, making your opponent feel hopeless is why a lot of people play Magic.
0-sum, etc.
So you're undefeated. Congratulations. Best of luck to you
Thank
the
you.
rest of the tournament. Autumn Burchett, Mono Blue Tempo. We'll be right back.